Welcome to a new season of Leadership Live podcast, where talented people become extraordinary leaders. I'm Daphne Horowitz, and I'm here to help you cut through the noise and talk about real leadership issues. Down to earth, solid, caring and confident leadership. No theory, no pie in the sky, no frills or fluff. Because this is what the world needs most right now. For you to lead with confidence, clarity and impact so that you can build a business that builds people, grows profit and makes a difference. Confucius says, "Our greatest glory is not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall." So what obstacles, failures, mistakes and challenges have you faced in your life? And what have you learned from them? The key is to learn from our mistakes so that we don't repeat them, and then we can truly rise above. This is a powerful lesson we learn from our conversation with Chad Kalland today. In this conversation, we go deep, and I really want to thank Chad for his openness in sharing his courageous journey with us. Chad has faced a lifetime of challenges, from financial struggles to mental illness, alcoholism and addictions. Chad hit his rock bottom when he let the pressure get to him and fell into the trap of alcohol. He weathered the storm and came out on top, turning his life around and becoming a successful, purpose-driven CEO. Besides for running a multinational company, he has dedicated his time to working on inclusion and diversity in the workplace through conversations by establishing the Second Story Project. This is a conversation you definitely want to hear. I'd love to know what insights get stirred for you as you listen, so make sure to let me know. Visit my website at daphnaHorowitz.com, where you can find all sorts of resources for leadership, and pop me a note to let me know. What insights did you have from listening to this conversation with Chad? Enjoy. So today we have got a very interesting and exciting guest with us. It's Chad Kalland. Thanks for being here, Chad.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk to you.
So a bit of an introduction. Chad is the CEO at Vector Environmental Services. And Chad, you've grown this company from one client to this regional leader in that industry. So amazing success there. What I love about your story is that you're the co-founder of the Second Story Project, which is really all about bringing equity, diversity, and inclusiveness into our workplaces. And that's something that really drives me as well. So that I know that that's something we have in common. I love how you say you call yourself a community activist. So that's awesome. I really want to hear more about that. And we all want to hear more about that, and really working towards anti-racism, and all your work with non-profit organizations is really inspiring to me, because I see you as a purpose-driven leader, and that's just really, really amazing. So looking forward to hear all your stories. And where I want to start is with that cliffhanger that you shared with me a little bit earlier, which is about how you have one person who's still your friend today. He was your mentor who hired you. He fired you. You got into this place of having lost everything. And let's hear a little bit about that, because it's kind of going from that place of having nothing and having to build to, the enormous success story that you are today. So let's start with the hard part, the challenge and the struggle. Tell us about that.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Daphne. And again, it's nice to be with you. Yeah. So my journey kind of into the environmental and industrial field started right out of college, and a man named Tom I connected with, and he hired me and put me on the path, and was really my professional mentor for a long time. And we worked together and through a couple of different companies. And after about working together for about 15 years, I was in a really dark place. I was drinking heavily. My work performance had really fallen off. My priorities had really gotten messed up. And I was kind of coached.
Did you know you were there when you were in that place of drinking, poor work performance?
Looking back, I can, in the moment, I felt like I felt like all my work was being handled, so I had permission to do it. Right. I was,
Okay.
as long as my work was done, I justified it, saying, "No, my work's handled. I can leave work at noon and go to the bar and not show back up or come in late." And looking back, it was absolutely, it was horrible behavior from an employee. I put Tom in a bad position by acting that way. And I put a lot of my employees at the time. I was a division manager at the time, and I put my employees in a bad position of either having to cover for me or having to do my work for me when I didn't show up. Um, so a lot
And
of
did you
this,
think that your drinking was within normal range? Do you think, oh, this is okay, I've got it handled, I'm still managing it? If you put yourself back there, because I hear that in hindsight,
yeah.
it's a different story, but I'm trying to get into your brain at that time.
At the time, I was I was proud of my drinking. I was like, I've got this well-paying job. I'm able to show up 4 hours a day. I can drink when I want. I'm a functional alcoholic. My work's still getting done. I kind of wore it like a badge of honor.
Oh, wow. Look at what I can do.
Exactly right. I'm so smart that I can do this and still get away with it. Right.
No. And I imagine there are a lot of people in this situation.
It's typical addict behavior, right? Don't worry about it. Everything's fine, and it's because I think, if I'd have realized it was a problem, I might have stopped sooner, right? Or something might have changed, because when I finally got fired, 15 years later, when Tom couldn't ignore, he couldn't tolerate or ignore my behavior anymore. And he told me at the time, this is the hardest decision I've ever had to make in my career. Even then, I left the office after getting fired and went to the bar. It still wasn't a problem. I just would find another job is kind of what I thought at the time.
So it's complete disconnect from reality, I would
Absolutely.
imagine.
Absolutely.
And interesting for me, because I think you're describing a period of 15 years. How long, I imagine in the beginning you were doing well and performing, so how long would you say that breakdown of the performance and behavior, how long did that take before Tom confronted it?
Yeah, it was gradual. We had discussions along the way. Like I said, he's a wonderful leader, a wonderful mentor. So he would call me in his office, or we would go to lunch, and he would talk to me about what he was seeing. But I would always still justify it as my work still getting done. But it was kind of an exponential. The growth was an exponential problem. It kind of started out as a little bit of a problem, and then when it became drinking every day, all day, it was it was really exponential, and continued, even after I got fired. I continued the behavior and was without a job, and kind of looking, but not really looking. I had Tom was nice enough to give me a severance package that I had some money coming in, so I didn't feel like I needed to go find another job. And it just gave me more hours of the day to kind of drink and mess up. And
I want to pause there, if you don't mind, just for a minute as well, because I think this is very useful for the listeners also, is that I hear often from the managers who have to fire an employee they've built a relationship with, and they really believe in their potential, but they are not seeing the progress. Feedback hasn't worked, and they now need to have this really difficult conversation of firing the person or letting them go. And I know how hard it is from the manager's side as well. So I can imagine, I don't know if you have any insight into that, how difficult it was for Tom, at that time to actually confront it with your history and background.
I'm in a position now where I've had to have similar discussions with employees. And it's, it's both, it's sad for me because I've seen, I've seen what those situations do to people, to their personal lives, right? I've seen how my alcoholism ruined my family, and how it, ruined my health at the time. And so I want to just fix somebody. And I imagine Tom was in the same place. And it's also infuriating because, You just want to, I want to shake him and say, look, I promise you, there is a light, right? You can change this, and there's so much more you can do. So that it's frustrating too. And I've
Do
had
you
to
ever share your story in those conversations? Do you ever say, I know where you are at, I've been there?
absolutely, and and I offer any help I can. I'll go sit in a meeting with them if they need to go to a meeting, and I'll introduce them. I have friends who are drug and alcohol counselors, and I know people who run drug and alcohol facilities, and I'll offer all of that, and I'll hear the same excuses that I would give to Tom. It's okay, I got it under control. And sometimes people accept the help. So it's rewarding when they do. And I also know that I can't fix everybody, and if I could, I really can't fix anyone. I can offer what help I can, and hope they listen. But I've had to let some people go that are near and dear to me.
Yeah, and that as a manager and a leader, you sometimes have to take that tough decision and say, okay, I've offered the help, I've given the feedback, I've been there for them, I've supported them. Now it's time to, take the next step, which is even tougher, and that's let them go.
And it really, what I came to realize is how my behavior was so toxic to the organization, right? But I was so self-absorbed with myself, with what I was doing, I didn't consider the organization. In my position now, I have to consider the organization. So when the behavior becomes so toxic, and it's not going to change for the benefit of everyone else that works in our organization, sometimes we have to make that tough decision.
Yeah. And that's such a good point, because what does it do to the culture? What does it do to the other people working there when this behavior is just continues and isn't stopped, or you're not actually taking that critical step? So looking back, I'm just thinking, if someone's listening and they recognizing parts of the story and saying, oh, maybe there's me in that story a little bit.
Yeah.
What would you want to say to them?
I would say that there are options, and it does get better, right? The idea of I don't know what I would do if I didn't have a drink. It was a thought that went through my head, or it's not a problem. I would say if you're thinking about it, it's probably a problem.
Yeah.
Right?
If you have to say it's not a problem, I would imagine that it is then a problem, because if it wasn't, you wouldn't be thinking of it.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
So that's a good one. I just love that. I want to flag that a little bit. If you're thinking about anything, it's not a problem. Just look at it a little bit more deeply.
Right. Because there's a reason you're thinking about it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it doesn't have, it could be anything. That's a good point. It doesn't have to be drugs or alcohol or an addiction. It just could be anything.
If you ever have to say the answer, it's not a problem, why is this question coming up in the first place?
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. But I would say, reach out to a therapist, reach out to a counselor. There are meetings all over the globe for alcohol, for narcotics, for any addiction. There are 12-step meetings.
And I'm thinking people know this, right? People actually know this. So what is that thing? I don't know if there is, again, I mean, maybe help me out here, but what is that thing that's going to go from it's not a problem to, hey, I need help? How does that turnaround actually happen? Or doesn't it? Do you need to maybe rely on the people that you love to have that difficult conversation with you? So that's another aspect.
I would imagine for everybody it's different. For me, it was really about, I was able to finally see the harm I was doing to people around me. I was really able to look at the damage I was doing to the people who were close to me, and get out of being selfish. It really was a selfish behavior. And when I did that, it wasn't easy because it came with a lot of guilt and shame. But that's what did it for me, and everyone may be different. I don't know that there is an answer, but that was my answer, is really being able to see the damage I was doing to the people around me.
That's interesting. So I think that's also a really great point in terms of maybe you think you've got it handled, But try and look at it from the perspective of the people around you. Do
Right.
they think you've got it handled? Get feedback. Ask them how your impact is on them. Get that
Right.
input from the people around you. Maybe that's something that can also be.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if someone tells you twice that your behavior is bothering them, chances are it's a problem.
Okay,
Right?
that's a
And
good
if it's
one.
not a problem for you, it's a problem for them. So even then, it's still worth looking at. Right?
Exactly. That's the distinction that I love that's coming out here. It's not if someone's giving you feedback and you're going, I don't think that's a problem for me, think again about how it shows up for them. What's the
Absolutely.
impact on them? Because, okay, not a problem for you, but people are telling you there's an impact on them. So do you care enough to look at
Right.
that?
And you know, I don't know if you want to go in this direction, but that's exactly what happens in a lot of conversations around in the Second Story Project around racism. When people say, "I'm not a racist," but if people are telling you this behavior is bothering them, or it's problematic, we have to look at
Yeah,
it. Right?
I
You have to
definitely
look
want to
at
go
it.
in that direction because I want you to tell us about the Second Story Project. So I don't know if you want to just skip ahead
Yeah.
and, tell us about the
Well,
amazing.
I can either way. I can tell you how we got there
Yeah.
to the Second Story Project. So after the firing, I'll fast forward it. I'll skip a lot of the details, but so after the firing, I hit rock bottom, was completely broke, and went to work on the BP oil spill in the Gulf Coast, in the Gulf region. Um, and then I joined with my business partner here at Vecta, and we started Vecta in 2013. Well, he started in 2011. I joined him in 2013. Um, and at Vecta, we've been very successful. But I was at a trade show, and my workforce is predominantly people of color. It's predominantly African American, Latinos. I would say 60 to 75% of my workforce is people of color. And my competition's workforce is similarly representative, right? So I was at a trade show, industry trade show. All of our competition was there, and everyone in the trade show, not everyone, but the vast majority of people in the trade show were white, and mostly white men. And I was wondering, so where is the door, right? Or where's the ceiling? Why is it that we all have this employee base that looks a certain way, but all the faces representing the companies look completely different? Um,
Wow. That's
so
a powerful question. Another,
yeah,
I mean, we've hit a few, but this is another one.
yeah,
That's exactly it. Where is that door?
and yeah, and then since and then knowing that there is obviously a door there, how do I open it? Right? What can I do to open it, or how can I do? What can I do to lift the ceiling for someone? Or so that really got me involved in anti-racism activism. I was raised in a household that there was always an anti-racist awareness. I was very fortunate to have that from my parents.
Mm.
Um, and then when I moved to Houston, I got involved with an organization called the Center for the Healing of Racism. Um, but I never put the two together. I never put anti-racism together with my workplace. There were two different things that I did.
Okay.
Um, but
So
this
this was like
awareness
the
that
charity
right,
projects, like the volunteer projects, or in
right,
the
and activism,
anti-racism,
right,
and then the
and
work was the work,
the work was the
and
work,
then the
right.
two all of a sudden coincided.
They coincided at this trade show when I had this awareness, and then um, this year or last year, I guess, in the heat of the George Floyd protests in the United States, I was really troubled by just the kind of division and what that I was seeing, the violence, and then the violence on one side and the just the complete lack of empathy from either side. So I reached out to a friend of mine here in Houston who I knew through my active anti-racism work, um, a black man who's a therapist here. And I reached out to him and I said, Ernest, what can we do? You and me, what can we do to put together even a workshop, right? To something to get people on opposite sides to talk. And he said, let's do something bigger. And we started the Second Story Project, which is really about working with organizations to to bring people of difference together. I think that a lot of diversity and inclusion programs are, this is our program, this is how we want you to behave, this is what you need to do to not get sued, right? I jokingly say that a lot of them are, it's etiquette school for white people. This is how you're supposed to act in the office. It's
so true.
This is how you're supposed to act in the office. Right, exactly.
And it's so much more than that, right? It's so much more than that.
Yeah, because I don't think that's effective. I don't think that changes people's. It might change their behavior at work, right? But if we really want to make an impact, how do we change the core of what people believe? How do we get people to see the humanity in the other side?
It's the core of what people believe, and for me, it's also rooted in relationship, right?
Absolutely.
How do we create strong, meaningful relationships between those? Not just taking off, okay, don't say this, do say this, do behave like, it's actually, how do we connect?
Right. It's about connection. And for me to see, to sit and listen to someone else's story, because I think we can argue over policies and we can argue over political parties and all that. And we're both going to be, it's an opinion, right? You can't really, but if I tell you my experience, if I tell you about the household I grew up in and how my mom was spit on because her best friend was a Native American girl and people were disgusted that my mom hung out with her, right? And if I tell you that my best friend growing up was a black kid named Brian, and I broke his heart one day because he hurt his eye and had an eye patch over his eye. And I said, well, pirates are white with black patches, right? That happened to me, right? And someone from the opposite side can't argue with that experience, right? And if someone tells me, well, I grew up in a neighborhood and I was dirt poor and I had to raise myself up by my bootstraps, so I don't believe in white privilege. Well, I have to listen to that, right? And I can't argue with that. But there's an area where we can find commonality, right? We can find our common ground and we can come together as humans, recognize each other as equals and build forward. And that's what we're trying to do.
I imagine there's an element of cultural transformation. We need to change the culture in our organization to be more inclusive. Right. And I think organizations are becoming more and more aware of that and the importance of that. To me, that comes from a human level. But is there something more? What is the language that they're using?
It's funny because I always say there's two sides to what we do at the Second Story Project. There is the human side that it just recognizing the common humanity in everyone is something we should all be doing. And some business leaders and some gatekeepers have to be sold on the dollars and cents part of it, right? We have to sell them on the increase in productivity and increase in creativity and collaboration. So it's not an either or when, if we're talking to an organization, it's a both and. Okay. It's the intention is we are going to transform the culture of your organization by creating a connection within your team. We're going to create a connection with the team members. The impact is it's going to make your company better, right? So it's an intention and an impact. Our intention is the soul part of it. The impact is you will see financial results from it. And unfortunately, Daphne, a lot of people, that's what they respond to is the dollars and cents part of it.
Yeah.
Because there's a risk too. There's a risk to bring these difficult conversations into a workplace, right?
What is the risk?
Well, the risk is you can alienate some people, right? Some people can, there are a lot of people who still strongly believe that, look, I worked my way up, everyone can work their way up. The myth of meritocracy in America is strong, right? It's the American dream that anyone can do whatever they want if they just try hard enough. And there are a lot of people who still believe that we all start on equal footing, right? So you can alienate people who have that strong belief. Okay. The counter
and you think
is
that a prevailing belief in?
It's not
America?
A prevailing. It's not a prevailing belief, but it's not non-existent. Right. It's not uncommon. I suspect that, in every organization, there are people who feel that way.
Mm.
Um,
So the
but
risk is alienating your employees who might be great performers, and then your
right.
business loses something in
Yeah.
the process.
And absolutely there's that risk. But and my argument to that is those people are already there. Right. So, um, and the, we're not doing it in a way to alienate them. What I want to hear is, okay, I believe that's how you feel. Now tell me how you got there, right? And I think once we show them that, we're not going to tell them that they're wrong. I think that the reason that a lot of traditional programs alienate those people is because they tell them their beliefs aren't legitimate.
Hmm. So you're not saying their beliefs aren't legitimate.
I want to hear how they got to that belief,
Okay.
right? And
So I
and it
think you're
goes
saying
back.
the key is not to actually to focus on not alienating even the voices that are hard to hear.
Right. No, you have to hear those voices.
Okay.
You have to hear those voices, or else it's an echo chamber, right? We're all
Yes.
saying the same thing.
It's
Uh,
very hard to hear those voices. And I've certainly
absolutely.
been in discussions where there is no room to hear those voices.
Absolutely. And what we try to do um, is we hear the experience of a person who believes that, but then he's going to be, or she's going to be forced to listen to someone
Hearing the
else,
experience of the
hear
others.
the experience
Exactly.
of someone else. And the idea is that, so where do we find commonality from these two extremes? And that's where the shared humanity, the connection comes in, because we are going to say, you know, you're going to be in a room with someone who doesn't agree with you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's going to be okay to not have those, to not agree. But what can we come to agreement on? What common ground do we share that we can build from?
Hmm.
And it's
And
hard.
well, this is quite challenging to me to think about, because even as I think about that, I think about wanting to change, the opinions or beliefs of people
Right.
who, especially when it comes to racism and bigotry and whatever else, it's very hard to not want to change their opinion, right?
Right. Yeah. But it's hard to, well, and it's not that I don't want to change their opinion, right?
Because you
But I
do. I
also,
mean, that's the truth. You actually
yeah,
do.
the idea is I want to change their belief, um, by making them confront an opinion, a different set of experience.
Maybe
Um,
by enabling them to
right.
hear and experience a different point of view
Right.
in an
Yeah.
open way.
Right. To just be open to hearing a different set of experiences that they probably haven't heard before. Because I believe their beliefs, my beliefs, are formed by my experience, right? So if I'm exposed to something different, if I'm exposed to a story that doesn't align with mine, well, maybe my belief, that opens up the opportunity for my belief to shift too. And we're not going to turn anyone 180 degrees through the
Mm.
period of a workshop or a 6 month engagement, or the idea is to turn, if we can get people to turn a little bit towards each other, 5 degrees closer to each other. Now, instead of 180 degrees difference, they're 170 degrees. And then we get them 5 more degrees closer. And the idea is to, just shift behavior and belief, and open people's hearts a little bit. And I think by just doing it a little bit, we can make a big
We're
difference.
taking a step forward. We're taking a step. So
Absolutely.
I really can relate so much to what you say because of my background. I come from South Africa, and the topic of racism is, clearly really,
Right.
really big there as well. And I can see that some of those racist beliefs are still existent in
Oh, yeah.
organizations for sure. And I can't help but sometimes feel that there's okay, I'm not allowed to talk like this. I'm not allowed to say this. I better watch what I say. But we don't really see behavior changing on the inside. They don't,
Right.
and for me, that is sometimes a little bit troubling.
Yeah.
I hear that it's important to do this work, and to really important to open awareness and have those conversations. And the more we do, as you said, every little degree shift is a
Yeah.
shift in the right direction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, just real quick, I was talking to a woman who's a DEI consultant at a large oil company here, Fortune 500, like a Fortune 10 company. And we were talking about some of the people that we talked about earlier, the people who don't believe that this is necessary, that racism doesn't exist. And I said, well, what do you do? What is your approach? How does your company handle the people who don't buy in? And she said the corporate message is, don't worry about those people, they'll catch up.
Okay. Okay, that's great. Because I would imagine those sitting on the fringes are also in the minority. They're not a huge segment.
But would you allow that if it were a safety issue? Would you allow unsafe employees?
Good point.
So if your culture is about equity and inclusion, if you say your culture is about safety, you eliminate unsafe employees, right? Or you change their behavior. You would never say,
don't worry about them.
Don't worry about that person, they'll catch up, right? So if your culture is about equity and inclusion, how do you bring those people in?
Yes.
And it has to be through discussions. It has to be by hearing their voice.
It has to be. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. It's a very nuanced topic and so difficult, but I so agree with you on the conversation and ongoing conversation, not a once-off, let's attend the seminar and then we're done. It's an ongoing conversation that becomes part of the culture of the organization. Wow.
Absolutely. Our tagline at the Second Story Project is more than a workshop, a movement, because I don't believe a workshop works, right? We want to create a global community of connection, based on the foundation of equity and inclusion.
Great conversation. Thanks, Chad. So I want to ask you, what is your vision for a better future? How do you see that panning out?
I mean, if I could, it would be that. It would be a global community of people who really recognize the common humanity, who recognize that, that we all at the core are creatures who crave love and connection, right? And if we all focused on that instead of our differences, I do believe, I know it sounds Pollyannish, but it's just a belief that if we all focused on the reality that we all crave love and connection, a lot of this divisiveness and division would go away.
Yeah, it's focusing on what we share, our shared experience rather than our shared human experience rather than kind of, I think superficial differences, right?
Absolutely.
Wow. Amazing. So we've come to the end of our time and it's been an awesome conversation. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Before we finish, I've got a couple of very quick fire questions for you. Okay. So the first one is, are you a morning or a night person?
I'm a morning person.
Are you?
Up early with coffee and in bed early.
Amazing. I have a belief, I'm a night person. I have a belief that this world is run by morning people. So that's why I have to ask this question.
Yeah.
And is there a book that you're reading at the moment that's, or recently, that's made a big impact on you?
So I just finished reading Caste, The Origins of Our Discontent by Isabel Wilkerson. And it really describes the structures in America and how caste, even more than race, kind of defines our structure. But now I'm reading a book called Morality, and really talks about how, the decline in morality across the globe has led to a lot of, at least in the author's view, has led to a lot of our problems and issues and struggles. So it's an interesting, two interesting books from two interesting perspectives. So
awesome. Thank you. And then my third question is around because I'm all about leadership habits and believing habits that are going to serve our leadership and the way that we show up in the world. So what is your worst leadership habit and best leadership habit that you can share with us?
Worst leadership habit. So I have a tendency, I want to, my worst leadership habit is I really want to fix the problem. And it goes against everything I believe, but it's still my default is to want to go and say, well, don't worry about it, I'll take care of it.
That's a good one.
But yeah, and my best leadership habit is listening. I'm a good listener, and I think that everything starts, with hearing what someone's problems are. Because the reality is, someone may come in thinking their issue is one thing, but if I listen, chances are it might be something different, and then we can really get to what the issues are. So listening.
Yep. I fully align with that, because I do think that a relationship starts with really being able to listen and hear.
Absolutely.
So if there's anything, I want to ask you if there's anything I haven't asked you about, something that you want to leave the listeners with. What is it that you would like to say? Or
no, I think we covered a lot of ground. I'm grateful for the opportunity. A lot of the stuff I hadn't talked about in a while, so it was good to look back on kind of how I got here and kind of some of those things. The only thing I would leave with is, give people the benefit of the doubt. So when, assume the best intentions in people, which is sometimes hard. But I do believe that if we can start there, it gives us a better opportunity to listen and hear them out. And then chances are we're going to find that common ground that we talked a lot about, and find that human connection that's so important.
It's true. It's something about really searching for that point of connection. Mm-hmm. And I do think that sometimes people just write people off and go, well, I'm not interested. It's not part of my ideology. I don't want to have anything to do with them, which I understand and respect. But what you're actually bringing to the table is saying, how do we create bridges? How do we create connection and conversation? Because that's what's going to move the world forward. So I love that. Thank you. Thanks so much also for sharing, the depth of your story. It was very present for me. So I really appreciate that. How can people get hold of you? And of course, we'll add that to the show notes as well, but maybe just let us know.
So if you're interested in the work we're doing at the Second Story Project, you can reach out at info@secondstoryproject.com. It's a long email address, but it's all spelled out. And that'll come right to me. You can also find me on the usual LinkedIn, and you can also get me at my personal email address, which is chadkalland at gmail.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. I've had a wonderful conversation, just really inspiring to have a glimpse into your world and your journey. So thanks so much for being here, Chad.
Thank you, Daphne. I really enjoyed it. Thanks.
This wraps up another episode of Leadership Live. Thank you for joining us today. And now let's continue the conversation. Do you have any questions, comments, or suggestions? Connect with me on LinkedIn or head on to my website at daphnehorovitz.com, where you can download a free sample of my new book, Weekly Habits for Extraordinary Leaders. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with a friend so that I can continue to reach and support leaders just like you. So tune in next week to Leadership Live, where talented people become extraordinary leaders.